The mind-body connection represents a physical network of neural pathways linking every internal organ directly to the brain's architecture. It begins with a single spark. Inside your nerves, tiny electrical impulses travel through thin fibers at speeds reaching over 200 miles per hour. These signals move through the spinal cord, a dense highway of roughly 13 million neurons that never stops its quiet work. Every sensation from your skin is mapped to a specific thin strip of tissue called the somatosensory cortex. If you enjoy these relaxing facts, please like and subscribe. This internal map is so precise that the brain can pinpoint a single hair moving on your arm. Most of this processing happens in the background without any conscious effort or a single thought from us. It is a perfect example of science for sleep, where the complexity of the body manages itself. Deep within the brainstem, a cluster of cells monitors the exact levels of carbon dioxide in your blood. This area, known as the medulla oblongata, triggers the physical rhythm of your lungs without you ever needing to intervene. It functions like a biological metronome that keeps time even when the rest of the mind is quiet. Your brain also maintains a constant 3D model of where your limbs are located in space. This sense is called proprioception, and it relies on specialized receptors tucked inside your muscles and joints. These sensors send constant updates about tension and position so the brain is never lost within its own frame. The primary motor cortex sits right next to the sensory map, allowing for nearly instantaneous physical reactions. When a signal reaches a muscle, it doesn't just happen once. It is a rapid-fire series of electrochemical bursts. These bursts are fueled by the movement of sodium and potassium ions across the cell membranes. The sheer scale of this wiring is difficult to grasp when we look at a single nerve cell. Each neuron can have thousands of branches called dendrites that reach out to connect with neighboring cells. This creates a web of trillions of synapses, all firing in a coordinated symphony to maintain your biological state. Glial cells act as the support crew for this massive electrical grid, outnumbering neurons in many parts of the brain. They provide the physical structure and insulation, known as myelin, which prevents the electrical signals from leaking or slowing down. Without this insulation, the coordination required for simple movements would take significantly longer to achieve. The entire system is bathed in cerebrospinal fluid, which acts as a shock absorber and a nutrient delivery system. This clear liquid circulates through the brain's ventricles and around the spinal cord in a continuous, gentle pulse. It is the plumbing that keeps the most delicate hardware in the known universe functioning at its peak. Because the brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, it manages its own unique internal environment. This barrier is a strict filter of specialized cells that only let specific molecules like glucose and oxygen through to the neurons. It is a fortress designed to keep the mind's chemistry stable regardless of what is happening in the rest of the body. The vagus nerve is the longest of the 12 cranial nerves, stretching from the brainstem all the way down into the abdomen. It functions as a massive bidirectional information highway, physically linking the mind to the heart, lungs, and digestive tract. This nerve isn't just a single cord, but a complex bundle of thousands of individual fibers that branch out like a tree. Have you ever noticed how a sudden memory can instantly change the way your chest or stomach feels? While many think of the brain as the commander, about 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers are actually afferent. This means the vast majority of the traffic on this neural highway is traveling upward, sending constant status updates from the organs to the brain. The brain is often the listener in this relationship, reacting to the biological data flowing from below. The remaining 20% of the fibers are efferent, carrying instructions from the brain back down to the body's internal systems. These signals help regulate involuntary functions like the steady beat of the heart or the rhythmic contractions of the intestines. It is a closed-loop conversation that happens entirely beneath the level of conscious thought. The vagus nerve is a primary component of the parasympathetic nervous system, which acts as a physiological brake. When this nerve fires, it releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine directly onto the heart's pacemaker cells. This chemical signal physically slows the electrical impulses, reducing the heart rate to maintain a stable internal state. The nerve also plays a specialized role in the way we process sounds and facial expressions. Specific branches of the vagus nerve connect to the muscles of the throat and the tiny muscles in the middle ear. This allows the brain to filter out high-frequency background noise so it can better focus on the specific frequencies of human speech. In the digestive system, the vagus nerve triggers the release of enzymes and stomach acid needed to break down nutrients. It senses the mechanical stretch of the stomach walls and sends that data to the hypothalamus to signal a sense of fullness. This sensory feedback loop is what allows the brain to accurately monitor the body's energy stores and metabolic needs. Because of its vast reach, the vagus nerve is often referred to by its Latin name, which translates to the wanderer. It passes through the jugular foramen at the base of the skull before threading its way through the neck and chest. Along this path, it interacts with nearly every major organ, acting as the ultimate coordinator of the body's internal landscape. Scientific research from institutions like the Cleveland Clinic shows that the tone of this nerve can be measured by looking at the timing between heartbeats. A high vagal tone is associated with greater physical resilience and a faster recovery from stress. It serves as a physical bridge that ensures the mind and the body stay in a state of constant, fluid communication. While the nervous system uses electrical impulses for speed, the endocrine system relies on the steady, rhythmic flow of the bloodstream. It acts like a biological postal service, sending chemical messengers called hormones to distant outposts in the body. These molecules must navigate the vast network of arteries and capillaries to find their specific cellular targets. This is built for bedtime listening. The hypothalamus sits at the very center of this chemical command structure. It is a tiny region of the brain that synthesizes oxytocin, a hormone often linked to social bonding and physical trust. Once created, oxytocin is stored in the posterior pituitary gland until it is needed by the body for various physiological functions. The chemical journey is often slow and deliberate. A primary example of this slow-burn communication is the HPA axis, which stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal pathway. When the brain perceives a challenge, the hypothalamus releases a signal that eventually reaches the adrenal glands sitting atop the kidneys. This sequence ensures that the body's response to its environment is coordinated across multiple organ systems. Each hormone has a specific lifespan. Cortisol is the primary output of this HPA axis and serves as a major metabolic regulator. According to clinical resources from the Endocrine Society, cortisol helps manage how the body uses fats, proteins, and carbohydrates for energy throughout the day. It follows a strict diurnal rhythm, usually peaking in the early morning to help the body transition into an active state. The blood carries these signals everywhere. Unlike the near-instant snap of a nerve impulse, hormones like cortisol have a measurable half-life in the blood. It typically takes about 60 to 90 minutes for the concentration of cortisol in the plasma to be reduced by half. This lingering presence allows the chemical signal to exert a sustained influence on cellular metabolism long after the initial trigger. The system requires constant, delicate balancing. The thyroid gland, located in the neck, receives its own set of chemical instructions from the pituitary gland. It produces hormones that act as a thermostat for the body's oxygen consumption and heat production. By adjusting these levels, the endocrine system ensures that every cell is operating at the correct metabolic speed for the current time of day. Molecules find their way home. Specific receptors on the surface of cells act as locks that only certain hormone keys can open. When a hormone molecule finally bumps into its matching receptor, it triggers a cascade of internal changes within the cell. This precision allows the brain to change the behavior of millions of cells simultaneously without needing a direct wire to each one. The flow remains constant and quiet. Deep within the walls of the digestive tract lies an independent web of circuitry known as the enteric nervous system. It contains roughly 500 million neurons, a number comparable to the entire spinal cord of many vertebrates. This vast collection of nerve cells allows the gut to manage complex tasks like digestion and local blood flow without needing constant instructions from the brain. The connection is more intimate than it seems. These neurons are organized into two thin layers of tissue that stretch from the esophagus down to the end of the gastrointestinal tract. While the brain can influence this system, the enteric nervous system is capable of operating entirely on its own if the primary vagus nerve were ever severed. This autonomy is why scientists often refer to the gut as the body's second brain. Messages move in both directions constantly. Have you ever experienced a sudden, heavy sensation in your stomach when receiving unexpected news or making a quick decision? This physical reaction is the enteric nervous system responding to chemical signals and shifting its own activity in real time. It acts as a primary sensor for the internal environment, translating chemical changes into neural signals. A hidden chemistry is at work here. Trillions of bacteria living within the gut, known collectively as the microbiome, serve as active participants in this neural conversation. These microbes break down dietary fibers to produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These specific molecules act as signaling agents that can influence the health of the intestinal lining and interact with nearby nerve endings. The gut is also a massive chemical factory. About 90% of the body's total serotonin, a neurotransmitter often associated with mood and behavior, is synthesized right in the digestive tract. Specialized cells called enterochromaffin cells produce this serotonin to regulate the rhythmic contractions of the gut muscles. Without this constant chemical output, the physical movement of nutrients through the system would simply stall. It is easy to assume this serotonin goes to the head. There is a common misunderstanding that the serotonin produced in the gut travels directly upward to influence the brain's emotional centers. In reality, serotonin molecules are too large to cross the blood-brain barrier, the protective filter that guards the central nervous system. This means the serotonin in your gut stays in your gut, performing strictly local tasks. The brain must make its own supply. The two pools of serotonin are kept strictly separate, yet they are linked through a complex signaling relay. When gut serotonin levels shift, it changes the way the vagus nerve fires, sending a coded message to the brainstem. The brain then interprets these sensory patterns and adjusts its own chemical production accordingly. The dialogue is nearly constant and silent. This gut-brain axis relies heavily on the amino acid tryptophan, which is the raw material needed to build serotonin. Because the microbiome influences how much tryptophan is available in the bloodstream, these tiny organisms indirectly control the building blocks the brain needs for its own neurochemistry. It is a collaborative effort between human cells and microbial guests. Signals journey through the vast inner landscape. The enteric nervous system also houses a diverse array of support cells called glia, similar to those found in the brain. These cells provide structural support and help maintain the delicate chemical balance required for neurons to fire properly. They act as the maintenance crew for the second brain, ensuring the signaling pathways remain clear and responsive. The kind of science that carries the mind gently outward. When the digestive system is at rest, the enteric nervous system conducts a migrating motor complex, a series of slow, sweeping electrical waves. This process acts as a housekeeping function, clearing out residual debris and maintaining a healthy microbial balance. It is a slow, rhythmic cycle that mirrors the quiet efficiency of the body's internal engineering. Everything is linked by invisible chemical threads. The brain does not simply sit inside the skull and command the body. It is physically reshaped by how we move. Every habitual posture and repetitive motion acts like a sculptor's tool on the motor cortex. When a specific movement is repeated, the neural territory dedicated to that body part actually expands to accommodate the demand for precision. Think back to when you were first learning a complex skill like riding a bicycle or playing a musical instrument, and how clumsy those first attempts felt compared to the fluid memory you have now. That shift from conscious effort to automatic grace happens because of neural pruning. The brain identifies the most efficient pathways for a signal and strengthens them while letting the unused, noisy connections wither away. This physical streamlining is why a seasoned pianist has a vastly different cortical map for their fingers than someone who has never touched a keyboard. The mind tracks these changes through a dedicated region called the insular cortex. This specialized fold of the brain acts as the primary hub for interoception, our internal sense of the body's physiological condition. It receives a constant stream of data from the heart, lungs, and gut, stitching it all together into a unified map of how we feel from the inside out. It is a high-speed translation service between raw biological data and the conscious mind. Tiny receptors hidden deep within the muscles provide constant updates on tension and position. These sensors, known as muscle spindles, detect the slightest stretch in a fiber and send that information up the spinal cord at lightning speed. The brain uses this feedback to adjust our balance and coordination before we even realize a correction was necessary. It is a closed-loop system that operates entirely beneath the level of conscious thought. The way we hold ourselves in space can even influence the way we process information. Research has shown that when the brain receives signals of a slumped or compressed posture, it can shift its overall neurochemical tone. This somatic feedback loop suggests that the body's physical state provides a fundamental context for how the brain interprets the world. Our thoughts are, in many ways, tethered to the physical geometry of our limbs. Even the skin plays a role in this massive data exchange. Mechanoreceptors in the dermal layers are sensitive enough to detect the vibration of a passing bee or the weight of a single hair. This tactile information is fed directly into the somatosensory cortex, which maintains a topographic map of the entire body surface. Areas with higher sensitivity, like the fingertips, occupy a much larger slice of this neural real estate. The brain is also capable of remapping itself when a limb is no longer there. In cases of limb loss, the cortical area that once managed the missing hand or foot doesn't just go silent. Instead, neighboring regions begin to invade that empty space, a process known as cortical remapping. This reflects the brain's relentless drive to stay fully occupied and its refusal to leave any neural territory unused. A good companion for the quieter hours. While we often focus on the brain's control of movement, its relationship with the immune system is perhaps even more intimate. There are hidden receptors on the surface of our defense cells that are specifically designed to listen for neural commands. This suggests a direct physical bridge between our thoughts and our resistance to microscopic invaders. The insular cortex also processes the temperature and pH levels of the blood. By monitoring these chemical markers, the brain can trigger systemic responses like shivering or sweating long before our core temperature becomes a danger. This internal thermostat relies on a steady flow of signals from every corner of the body to maintain the delicate balance of homeostasis. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering that never takes a break. Fascinatingly, the brain's map of the body is not fixed but highly plastic. This means that even in adulthood, we can physically reorganize our neural architecture by exposing ourselves to new sensory environments. When we learn to navigate a new space or manipulate a new tool, the brain begins the work of incorporating that experience into its internal model. The boundaries of the self are more fluid than they appear. Small shifts in perception can have a ripple effect through the entire system. The way the brain interprets a racing heart can change based on the information it receives from the surrounding muscles and the digestive tract. If the body reports a state of readiness, the brain might view the rapid pulse as a sign of excitement rather than distress. It is a constant negotiation between the physical and the mental. This is built for bedtime listening. Beyond the nerves and muscles, the body's internal signaling network reaches deep into the very cells that protect us from disease. These immune cells are far from independent. They are physically wired into the nervous system in ways we are only beginning to understand. The same chemicals that allow neurons to talk to each other are also used to recruit the body's internal defenses. The brain's map of the body is constantly being updated and refined. Every time we move, every time we stretch, and even while we are perfectly still, the insular cortex is busy cataloging the state of our internal world. This quiet, persistent data stream ensures that the brain and body remain a single, integrated unit. It is a silent dialogue that defines the very essence of being alive. The complexity of this wiring is truly immense. The immune system is often described as a floating army of cells, but it is actually physically tethered to the brain through a complex network of nerve fibers. In the specialized field of psychoneuroimmunology, researchers have mapped out how the sympathetic nervous system sends direct branches into the bone marrow and the thymus. These are the primary sites where immune cells are born and reach maturity. By physically touching these tissues, the brain can influence the rate at which new defensive cells are produced. This is a good companion for the quieter hours. In the spleen and lymph nodes, nerve endings don't just pass by. They terminate in specific zones where T cells and B cells congregate. This physical architecture allows the brain to release norepinephrine directly onto these immune cells in response to environmental changes. It is a hardwired connection that functions much like a traditional circuit, rather than a loose chemical soup. The communication is never just one way. While the brain sends signals down, the immune system sends a constant stream of information back up to the central nervous system. This is largely managed through small signaling proteins called cytokines, which act as the primary vocabulary of the immune response. When these proteins cross into the brain, they can alter neural activity, effectively telling the brain that the body is fighting an invader. A silent dialogue keeps the body in balance. Scientists have discovered that many immune cells possess their own receptors for classic neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine. This means that a white blood cell can hear the same chemical messages that neurons use to communicate with each other. It allows the immune system to adjust its behavior based on the neural state of the organism. But how do these two systems stay in sync? The vagus nerve serves as a critical sensor for this internal monitoring, detecting the presence of inflammatory markers in the peripheral organs. Once sensed, this information is whisked to the brainstem, which can then trigger a reflex to dampen overactive immune responses. This prevents the body's defenses from causing collateral damage to healthy tissues. The physical wiring is remarkably precise. In the gut, the density of this crosstalk is particularly high, as the vast majority of the body's immune cells reside just millimeters away from the enteric nervous system. Here, the interaction is constant, as the brain monitors the balance of the microbiome and the integrity of the intestinal wall. It is a high-stakes meeting of two of the body's most complex systems. The science carries the mind gently outward. When the sympathetic nervous system is highly active, it can actually suppress the activity of certain natural killer cells through these direct nerve connections. This isn't a matter of mood or mindset, but a biological trade-off where the body prioritizes immediate physical action over long-term immune surveillance. It demonstrates how the brain manages the body's limited energy resources during different states of arousal. This relationship is built on tangible physical structures. Even the blood-brain barrier, once thought to be an impenetrable wall, is now known to have specialized gateways for immune cell traffic. During certain conditions, T cells can migrate into the central nervous system to perform patrols, interacting directly with the brain's resident immune cells, the microglia. This ensures that the brain's unique environment is protected by the same mechanisms that guard the rest of the body. The complexity of these pathways is truly vast. The heart does not beat with the mechanical regularity of a metronome. Instead, a healthy heart constantly shifts its rhythm, adjusting the space between each beat based on the immediate needs of the body. This phenomenon is known as heart rate variability, and it serves as a primary indicator of how well the autonomic nervous system is functioning. The math behind these tiny fluctuations is quite elegant. Scientists measure the variation in time between consecutive heartbeats, often down to the millisecond, to determine how flexible the body is in responding to its environment. High variability generally suggests that the nervous system is balanced and capable of switching between action and rest with ease. Within the walls of the carotid arteries and the aortic arch, specialized sensors called baroreceptors act as the body's internal pressure gauges. They are incredibly sensitive to the mechanical stretching of the blood vessel walls that occurs with every single pulse. This creates a constant stream of data that flows directly to the brainstem to help regulate blood pressure. If the blood pressure rises even slightly, these receptors fire more rapidly. The brain receives this signal and immediately sends instructions back to the heart to slow down and to the blood vessels to dilate. This feedback loop, known as the baroreflex, is one of the most rapid and efficient regulatory systems in the human body. Think back to a time when a sudden, sharp sound caught you completely off guard. Can you recall that specific thumping sensation in your chest as your heart rate jumped in a single second? That physical shift is the result of your brain temporarily overriding the baroreflex to prepare your muscles for immediate movement. In the quieter moments, the parasympathetic nervous system takes the lead. This branch of the nervous system uses the vagus nerve to release acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that acts like a gentle brake on the heart's natural pacemaker. This is the kind of science that makes for excellent bedtime listening. The heart and the lungs are also physically synchronized through a process called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. As you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up slightly, and as you exhale, it slows down again. This rhythm ensures that blood is pumped most efficiently when the lungs are full of fresh oxygen. Researchers use these heart rate patterns to map out the tone of the nervous system. A person with high vagal tone can recover from a stressor much faster than someone whose heart rate remains static or rigid. This flexibility is a hallmark of biological resilience and efficient energy management. Even the simple act of changing your physical posture triggers a complex cardiovascular dance. When you stand up, gravity pulls blood toward your lower extremities, which could cause a sudden drop in brain perfusion. The baroreceptors sense this change instantly and trigger a compensatory increase in heart rate to maintain steady flow. The brainstem processes these signals in a region called the medulla oblongata. This area acts as a sophisticated command center, integrating information from the heart, the lungs, and the blood vessels to ensure the entire system remains in a state of homeostasis. It is a silent, subconscious operation that never pauses. Low heart rate variability is often studied as a marker for physical or mental fatigue. It suggests that the body is stuck in a fight or flight mode, unable to access the restorative rest and digest state. Understanding these metrics helps scientists develop better ways to monitor long-term health and recovery. The cardiovascular system is not just a pump and a set of pipes. It is a highly sensitive sensory organ that communicates with the brain every moment of the day. This constant conversation allows the body to maintain a perfect internal balance regardless of what is happening in the outside world. When the body enters a state of deep rest, the heart rate variability often reaches a very specific rhythmic pattern. This state of resonance occurs when the heart rate, respiration, and blood pressure rhythms all align. It is a physical manifestation of the body's systems working in complete harmony. The precision of this system is what allows the human body to adapt to everything from a sprint to a deep sleep. Every millisecond of variation is a sign of a nervous system that is listening and responding to the needs of the organism. It is a quiet, rhythmic engineering of the highest order. Deep within the lower reaches of the brainstem exists a tiny, specialized cluster of neurons known as the Prebotzinger complex. This microscopic region acts as the primary pacemaker for the entire respiratory system, firing in a rhythmic, self-sustaining pattern. It generates the essential signals that travel down the spinal cord to the diaphragm, ensuring the mechanical cycle of inhalation and exhalation continues without a single conscious thought. These neurons are remarkably resilient, maintaining their firing rate even when isolated from the rest of the brain in laboratory settings. This intrinsic rhythm is the physical foundation of human life, operating reliably from the first moment of birth until the very end. The complexity of this neural timing is a fine example of biological engineering, a good companion for the quieter hours. The urge to breathe is often misunderstood as a simple need for more oxygen. In reality, the primary biological trigger for a new breath is the buildup of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. Specialized sensors called chemoreceptors, located in the carotid arteries and the medulla, monitor the pH levels of the blood with extreme precision. When carbon dioxide levels rise, the blood becomes slightly more acidic, which these sensors detect immediately. This chemical shift sends an urgent signal to the brainstem to initiate a breath to clear the excess gas. Most healthy individuals actually have plenty of oxygen in their system even when they feel the air hunger caused by rising CO2 levels. This sensitivity to carbon dioxide varies significantly between individuals based on their metabolic health and physical conditioning. Some people have a high tolerance for CO2, allowing for a slower, more efficient respiratory rate, while others respond more quickly to even minor fluctuations. It is a chemical feedback loop that functions like a highly tuned thermostat, keeping the internal environment within a very narrow, safe range. The mechanical act of breathing also plays a direct role in how blood moves through the brain. As the rib cage expands and the diaphragm moves, it creates pressure changes within the chest cavity that influence the entire circulatory system. These fluctuations are not limited to the torso. They extend all the way up into the skull, affecting the flow of cerebrospinal fluid and blood. Inhalation and exhalation cause subtle but measurable pulses in the vessels that supply the cerebral cortex. During certain phases of the respiratory cycle, the veins in the brain actually drain more efficiently due to the negative pressure created in the chest. This constant, rhythmic washing helps maintain the delicate pressure balance required for optimal neural function. Cerebral blood flow is also regulated by the concentration of gases in the blood through a process called vasodilation. When carbon dioxide levels rise slightly, the smooth muscles in the walls of the brain's arteries begin to relax. This causes the vessels to widen, allowing more blood to flow through the neural tissue to deliver nutrients and remove metabolic waste. Conversely, when carbon dioxide levels are lower, these same vessels constrict slightly to maintain a steady pressure. This vascular response is so sensitive that even small changes in the depth or rate of respiration can shift the diameter of the cerebral arteries within seconds. The brain effectively uses the chemistry of the breath to manage its own plumbing. The relationship between the lungs and the brain is a two-way street of constant communication. While the brainstem dictates the rhythm, the state of the blood determines the urgency and the volume of each cycle. It is a masterpiece of fluid dynamics and chemical signaling that operates entirely behind the scenes. Scientists have found that the rhythm of the breath can actually synchronize with other neural oscillations in the brain. Areas involved in memory and emotional processing, such as the hippocampus and the amygdala, often show electrical activity that rises and falls in time with the signals from the pre-Botzinger complex. This suggests that respiration might act as a fundamental metronome for the entire central nervous system. Even the simple physics of air moving through the nasal passages provides sensory feedback to the brain. Mechanoreceptors in the lining of the nose detect the cool sensation of moving air, sending data to the olfactory bulb and beyond. This sensory input provides a constant stream of information to the brain about the environment and the body's interaction with it. The mechanics of the lungs are supported by a complex network of muscles, including the intercostals between the ribs. These muscles work in tandem with the diaphragm to change the volume of the thoracic cavity, a process that requires a delicate balance of tension and release. Each cycle is an intricate coordination of skeletal muscle, autonomic nerves, and vascular response. In a state of rest, the body naturally moves toward a more efficient, slower respiratory pattern. The metabolic demands of the muscles decrease, which in turn reduces the production of carbon dioxide. The Prebotzinger complex responds by spacing out its signals, allowing the entire system to settle into a steady, low-energy state. This transition is governed by the parasympathetic nervous system, which acts as a brake on the body's more active processes. As the heart rate slows, the respiratory rhythm follows suit, creating a feedback loop that reinforces physical stillness. The body is designed to find this equilibrium whenever the external environment allows for it. The science of respiration reveals a system that is far more than just a pair of bellows. It is a sophisticated chemical regulator, a driver of cerebral circulation, and a foundational clock for neural activity. Every element, from the acidity of the blood to the diameter of the brain's arteries, works in concert to preserve the stability of the organism. Observing these mechanisms from a purely biological perspective highlights the incredible resilience of the human frame. The system doesn't require our attention to function. It is built to manage itself with quiet, relentless precision. It is a process of constant adjustment, a silent internal dialogue that never ceases its work. The brain maintains a constant, invisible map of the physical self within the somatosensory cortex. This region, located in the parietal lobe, acts as a biological switchboard where every square inch of skin has a dedicated neural representative. Scientists often visualize this internal map as a distorted figure called the cortical homunculus. If the body were built to match the amount of brain space dedicated to each part, the hands and lips would be massive, while the trunk and legs would appear tiny. The high density of neurons for the fingertips allows for the incredible tactile precision needed to thread a needle or read Braille. In contrast, the midback has relatively few sensory receptors, which is why it is difficult to pinpoint the exact location of a light touch in that area. This neural representation is not fixed and can actually expand or shrink based on how much a specific body part is used. Researchers have found that string musicians often have a larger cortical area dedicated to their fingering hand compared to non-musicians. Deep within the muscles and tendons, specialized sensory receptors called proprioceptors work like internal GPS units. These tiny organs provide a constant stream of data about the body's position in three-dimensional space, even when the eyes are closed. One primary type of proprioceptor is the muscle spindle, which detects changes in muscle length. When a muscle stretches, these spindles fire signals to the brain to prevent overextension, helping to maintain posture and coordinate smooth movements. Complementing the spindles are the Golgi tendon organs, located where the muscles meet the bone. These sensors measure the amount of tension or force being applied, acting as a safety mechanism to prevent the muscles from pulling too hard and causing injury. The brain integrates this data from thousands of sensors to calculate exactly where your limbs are at any given millisecond. This process is so seamless that most people never have to consciously think about where their feet are while walking. Have you ever tried to touch your nose in a pitch-black room and marveled at how your hand knows exactly where to go? This internal awareness is what allows for complex tasks like typing or driving without constantly looking at your limbs. Proprioception is heavily reliant on the constant pull of gravity to provide a baseline for the body's orientation. When that baseline is removed, the brain can become momentarily confused about the body's physical limits and location. Astronauts living on the International Space Station often report a phenomenon known as the lost limb effect. During sleep, If an arm floats away from the body in microgravity, the astronaut may wake up unable to feel or locate the limb until they see it. This happens because, without the weight of the arm pulling on the joints and muscles, the proprioceptors stop sending the familiar signals of down or heavy. The brain essentially loses track of the arm's position in the absence of gravitational resistance. NASA researchers study these effects to understand how the human nervous system adapts to extreme environments. They found that the brain eventually recalibrates, relying more heavily on visual cues and touch to compensate for the lack of traditional proprioceptive feedback. This adaptability highlights the plastic nature of the human brain. Even when the fundamental rules of physics change, the somatosensory system works tirelessly to redraw the internal map of the self to ensure survival. The joints also contain specialized receptors that monitor the angle of each limb. These sensors are particularly active during movement, providing the cerebellum with the data necessary to adjust balance and prevent a fall. Together, these systems create a sense of embodiment, the feeling that your body belongs to you and occupies a specific place in the world. It is a quiet, foundational part of the human experience that operates entirely behind the scenes. Think back to a time you learned a new physical skill, like swinging a golf club or balancing on a bicycle. That initial clumsiness was actually your brain struggling to integrate new proprioceptive patterns into its existing map. As you practiced, the neural pathways became more efficient, and the movement transitioned from a conscious effort to an automatic reflex. This is the physical manifestation of muscle memory, though the change actually occurs within the architecture of the brain. The somatosensory cortex also processes temperature and pain, serving as a vital early warning system. These signals travel along different neural pathways than touch, ensuring that the brain prioritizes potential threats to the body's integrity. It is a good companion for the quieter hours to consider how much work the brain does just to keep us oriented. Every twitch of a finger or shift in posture is the result of a massive, high-speed data exchange between the periphery and the core. Even when the body is completely still, the proprioceptors continue to fire at a baseline rate. This resting signal tells the brain that the system is intact and ready for action the moment movement is required. The complexity of this network is a testament to the biological engineering required for movement. From the microscopic spindles in the calf muscles to the vast processing power of the parietal lobe, it is a system defined by its relentless attention to detail. This constant internal dialogue ensures that the mind and body remain a singular, coordinated unit. It is a silent, enduring partnership that allows us to navigate the physical world with grace and precision, day after day. Deep within the center of the brain sits a tiny cluster of nerve cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This structure acts as the master conductor for the entire body's internal timing system. It is roughly the size of a grain of rice. Despite its small stature, it manages the complex scheduling of nearly every biological process we experience. This master clock operates on a cycle that lasts approximately 24 hours. It relies on external cues to stay synchronized with the rotation of the planet. Light is the most influential signal for this internal timer. When specialized cells in the eyes detect morning light, they send a direct electrical message to the brain to reset the daily count. This signal travels through a dedicated neural pathway that bypasses the parts of the brain used for conscious sight. Even if a person cannot see images, their internal clock can often still sense the presence of light. The pineal gland responds to these signals by adjusting the production of melatonin. This hormone serves as a chemical signal that tells the rest of the body whether it is day or night. Melatonin levels typically stay low during the hours of sunlight. As the environment grows darker, the brain begins to ramp up production to prepare the system for a period of restoration. The master clock in the brain is not the only timepiece the body possesses. Nearly every organ and tissue type contains its own independent peripheral clock. The liver, for example, has its own internal schedule for processing nutrients and managing blood sugar. This ensures that metabolic activity peaks when the body is most likely to be active and consuming energy. Muscle tissue also follows a rhythmic pattern of strength and efficiency. These peripheral clocks allow individual systems to prepare for specific tasks before they actually occur. Even fat cells have their own timing mechanisms. They regulate the release of energy-storing hormones based on the expected needs of the body throughout the day and night. The synchronization of these many clocks is managed through a complex dance of genetics. Inside our cells, a specific group of genes engages in what scientists call a transcription-translation feedback loop. This process involves proteins that build up in a cell over several hours until they reach a certain threshold. Once they hit that limit, they shut off the very genes that created them. As the proteins slowly degrade, the genes turn back on and start the cycle over again. This molecular pendulum is the fundamental engine that drives our sense of biological time. The science of these rhythms is built for bedtime listening. It reveals a hidden layer of coordination that ensures the body is never caught off guard by the transition from activity to rest. When the master clock in the brain and the peripheral clocks in the organs are in alignment, the body functions with peak efficiency. Metabolism, immune response, and cognitive clarity all follow this unified beat. Disruptions to this timing, such as traveling across time zones, can cause a temporary mismatch between the brain and the body. The resulting fatigue is the physical sensation of different organs trying to operate on different schedules. The heart also follows these rhythmic instructions. Its rate and the pressure within the vessels fluctuate in a predictable pattern to support the varying demands of a full day. Temperature regulation is another key responsibility of the master clock. The body's core heat actually dips slightly during the quietest hours to conserve energy and facilitate cellular repair. Digestion slows down significantly during the night as part of this program shift. The gut uses this downtime to perform maintenance on its lining and manage the balance of the microbiome. These internal schedules are remarkably resilient. Even in total darkness, the body will continue to follow a roughly 24-hour pattern, though it may drift slightly without the anchoring effect of the sun. The study of these rhythms shows us that we are deeply connected to the cosmic cycles of light and dark. Every cell in the human frame is, in a sense, a living clock tuned to the rhythm of the world. Beneath the skin, a silvery, translucent web of connective tissue called fascia wraps around every muscle and organ in the body. For a long time, researchers viewed this material as a simple packaging system, similar to plastic wrap used to keep things in their proper place. We now know it functions as a sophisticated sensory organ that is more densely packed with nerve endings than almost any other part of the human frame. This vast network is constantly sending a stream of data to the brain regarding the body's internal orientation and mechanical stress. It is an intricate communication system that operates silently in the background of every movement. The fibers within this tissue are primarily composed of collagen. which possesses a fascinating property known as the piezoelectric effect. When these fibers are compressed or stretched, they generate small electrical charges that act as signals for the cells nearby. This means the very act of changing posture or shifting weight creates a localized electrical conversation within the tissue itself. Through this mechanism, the fascia helps the brain understand the global state of the body without the need for conscious thought. It tracks how much tension is being held in a limb and how that tension is distributed across the entire musculoskeletal system. In the thinner layers of tissue just under the surface of the skin, the density of sensory receptors is particularly high. These mechanoreceptors are specifically tuned to detect light touch, vibration, and even the subtle pull of gravity on the limbs. There are more of these receptors in the fascia than there are in the muscles themselves, making it the primary source of our internal sense of self. It provides a high-definition map of where we are in space, constantly updating as we move or rest. This internal mapping system is part of how the body processes sensory data when external movement stops and we prepare to fall asleep. The brain begins to filter out the noise of the outside world, focusing instead on the quiet signals rising from the connective tissues. One type of receptor found in this network, called the interstitial receptor, is linked directly to the parts of the brain that regulate emotional state and physical arousal. When these receptors are stimulated by slow, steady pressure, they send signals to the nervous system that can help lower heart rate and blood pressure. This suggests that the state of our connective tissue is intimately tied to our overall sense of well-being. If the fascia is tight or restricted, it sends a constant signal of noise or stress to the brainstem. Conversely, when the tissue is hydrated and supple, the signals it sends are much more harmonious. Water plays a critical role in how this information travels through the body. Fascia is largely made of fluid-loving molecules that allow the layers of tissue to glide past one another with minimal friction. If the tissue becomes dehydrated, this gliding motion is lost, and the sensory signals can become distorted or dampened. Healthy fascia acts like a liquid crystal, vibrating with information that keeps the brain informed about the structural integrity of the body. It ensures that every part of the system is aware of what every other part is doing at any given moment. Researchers have found that this network is also sensitive to chemical changes in the blood. When we experience physical stress, the chemistry of the interstitial fluid changes, and the fascia responds by physically tightening or relaxing. This responsiveness makes the facial system a bridge between the chemical environment of the body and the mechanical world of movement. It is a unifying structure that reminds us the body is not just a collection of parts, but a single, integrated living process. Deep inside the brain, a small region called the hypothalamus works tirelessly as the body's primary thermostat. It constantly monitors the temperature of the blood passing through it, maintaining a steady internal environment within a very narrow range. This tiny command center receives data from thermal receptors in the skin and deep within the abdominal cavity to make split-second adjustments. The kind of science that carries the mind gently outward. To lower the body's core temperature, the hypothalamus triggers a process known as vasodilation. This involves the widening of blood vessels in the skin, particularly in the hands and feet, which allows warm blood to flow closer to the surface. As this blood moves toward the extremities, heat radiates away from the body and into the surrounding air. This shedding of internal warmth is a vital biological precursor to cellular rest and metabolic recovery. For the body to transition into a state of deep repair, the core temperature must typically drop by about 1 or 2 degrees. This cooling signal tells the rest of the system that it is time to shift away from active energy expenditure. While the skin may feel warm during this process, the internal organs are actually becoming cooler. This inverse relationship is managed by the autonomic nervous system, which coordinates the movement of blood away from the core and toward the periphery. It is a precise redistribution of energy designed to protect the brain and vital organs from overheating. The hypothalamus also regulates the activity of sweat glands to assist in this cooling through evaporation. When moisture on the skin evaporates, it pulls thermal energy away from the body, a process that is incredibly efficient even in subtle amounts. This mechanism is so sensitive that it can respond to changes in external temperature before the core even begins to shift. At the same time, the endocrine system begins a process of downregulation to support this thermal shift. The production of cortisol, which typically keeps the body alert and generates heat through metabolism, starts to decline significantly. This hormonal dip reduces the amount of internal heat generated by the muscles and liver. Thyroid hormones also play a role in this cooling phase by slowing down the rate at which cells burn fuel. By lowering the metabolic fire, the body ensures that heat production does not outpace the cooling efforts of the skin and breath. This creates a quiet, low-energy state where cellular maintenance becomes the primary focus. Brown adipose tissue, or brown fat, acts as a specialized biological heater that the hypothalamus can switch on or off. Unlike regular white fat, brown fat contains a high density of mitochondria that generate heat through a process called non-shivering thermogenesis. In the lead-up to rest, the activity in these tissues is dialed back to allow the cooling process to take hold. Deep within the temporal bone of the skull lies a complex of tunnels and chambers known as the bony labyrinth. This structure houses the organs responsible for two of our most fundamental sensory experiences: hearing and balance. While they seem like distinct functions, they are physically integrated into a single sensory system that shares the same fluid-filled spaces. The vestibule of the inner ear contains the otolith organs, specifically the saccule and the utricle. These tiny sacs are lined with specialized sensory cells that detect linear acceleration and the constant pull of gravity. They allow the brain to understand if the body is moving forward in a car or rising in an elevator without needing to look outside. Inside these organs, microscopic crystals of calcium carbonate called otoconia sit atop a gelatinous layer. When the head tilts or moves, these heavy crystals shift, dragging the gel-like substance across the cilia of underlying hair cells. This physical displacement creates an electrical signal that tells the nervous system exactly where the head is in relation to the center of the earth. Branching off from the vestibule are the three semicircular canals, which are oriented in different planes to cover three-dimensional space. These loops are filled with a fluid called endolymph that moves whenever the head rotates. This movement provides a constant stream of data about angular acceleration, such as when someone shakes their head or turns a corner. The fluid dynamics within these canals are remarkably precise, operating on the principle of inertia. As the head begins to rotate, the fluid inside initially stays still, pushing against a structure called the cupula. This bending of the cupula stimulates sensory neurons, providing an immediate report on the speed and direction of the turn. This vestibular information travels along the vestibulocochlear nerve directly to the cerebellum and the brainstem. These areas of the brain process the data to coordinate eye movements and muscle tone across the entire body. It is this rapid neural feedback loop that allows a person to maintain their balance even on uneven ground or in total darkness. Connected to this balance center is the cochlea, a snail-shaped structure dedicated to the mechanics of sound. When vibrations reach the inner ear, they create traveling waves in the fluid that fills the cochlear chambers. These waves move along a flexible floor known as the basilar membrane, which varies in thickness and tension from one end to the other. High-frequency sounds create peak vibrations at the base of the cochlea, while low-frequency sounds travel all the way to the apex. This spatial organization allows the brain to distinguish between a deep rumble and a high-pitched whistle based purely on which part of the membrane is moving. It is a biological form of spectral analysis that happens in real time. Sitting on top of the basilar membrane is the organ of Corti, which contains thousands of delicate stereocilia. As the membrane moves, these hair cells are pushed against an overlying structure, causing them to bend. This mechanical bending opens tiny ion channels at the tips of the hairs, converting the physical energy of a wave into an electrical impulse. The sensitivity of these stereocilia is such that they can detect movements as small as the diameter of an atom. They are the primary transducers of the auditory system, turning the pressure changes of the external world into the language of the brain. Once damaged, these cells in humans do not naturally regenerate, making the protection of the inner ear vital for long-term sensory health. The integration of the auditory and vestibular systems ensures that the brain maintains a stable perception of the world. Even as the head moves and the body shifts, the auditory system can continue to localize sounds accurately because it is constantly updated by the balance organs. This synergy is a masterwork of biological engineering that operates silently and continuously. The eyes do more than construct a visual map of the world. Hidden within the retina is a small population of specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. These cells are not used for seeing shapes or colors, but instead act as biological light meters. They contain a photopigment called melanopsin that is particularly sensitive to the short wavelength blue light found in the daytime sky. When these cells detect light, they send electrical signals directly to the hypothalamus. This is a region of the brain that governs the autonomic nervous system, which manages the body's internal state without conscious effort. This light-sensing pathway helps the body decide whether to lean toward a sympathetic state of alertness or a parasympathetic state of rest. In bright environments, the signal from these cells suppresses the production of certain hormones while encouraging others that maintain wakefulness. It is a direct physical link between the brightness of the environment and the chemistry of the blood. The pupils themselves participate in this constant adjustment through the pupillary light reflex. This is a simple but precise mechanical loop where the circular muscles of the iris constrict or dilate based on the intensity of incoming light. While we often think of this as a way to protect the retina, it is also a signal to the brain about the energy levels of the surrounding space. This system is so robust that it can function even in some individuals who have lost their sight. Because the iPRGCs are separate from the rods and cones used for vision, the body can still synchronize its internal tone with the sun's cycle without perceiving a single image. It is a form of light sensing that operates entirely in the background of our awareness. The eyes also influence our physical posture and muscle tone through the vestibulo-ocular reflex. This mechanism coordinates eye movements with head movements to keep images stable on the retina. If you tilt your head, your eyes automatically rotate in the opposite direction to maintain a level horizon. This constant stabilization requires a massive amount of computational power from the brainstem. It ensures that the sensory input from the eyes matches the balance data coming from the inner ear. When these two systems disagree, the body often responds with a physical sense of unease or nausea, showing how deeply visual processing is tied to our physical comfort. Even the way we move our eyes can shift our internal state. Smooth pursuit movements, which occur when we track a slow-moving object, involve different neural circuits than saccades, which are the quick, jerky jumps our eyes make when scanning a room. Some research suggests that these different types of movement can subtly nudge the autonomic nervous system toward different levels of tension or ease. The lacrimal glands, which produce tears, are also under the control of the autonomic nervous system. Basal tears are constantly secreted to keep the cornea lubricated and healthy, while emotional or irritant-driven tears involve a different chemical composition. This secretory system is a reminder that the eyes are living tissues that require constant maintenance and hydration to function. The cornea is one of the most densely innervated parts of the entire human body. It contains a high concentration of sensory nerve endings that are incredibly sensitive to touch, temperature, and chemical changes. This sensitivity triggers the blink reflex, one of the fastest movements the human body can perform, happening in roughly 1/10 of a second. This rapid response is a specialized survival mechanism designed to protect the clarity of our vision at all costs. Every time we blink, the brain momentarily suppresses visual processing so we don't perceive the world as flickering. It is a seamless edit in our conscious experience that happens thousands of times every day. The relationship between the eyes and the brain's internal clock is perhaps the most significant non-visual function of the visual system. By monitoring the shifting angles and colors of light throughout the day, the eyes help the brain calculate exactly where the body is in its daily cycle. This ensures that our metabolic processes are timed correctly for the demands of the environment. When the light fades, the signal from the iPRGCs changes, allowing the brain to transition into a different physiological mode. This shift affects everything from body temperature to heart rate. It is the kind of science that carries the mind gently outward toward the vast rhythmic cycles of the natural world. The brain possesses its own specialized waste management infrastructure known as the glymphatic system. While the rest of the body relies on the lymphatic system to clear out cellular debris, the brain is separated by a strict blood-brain barrier. To solve this, a network of microscopic channels allows cerebrospinal fluid to flow deep into the brain tissue. This fluid acts as a biological solvent, rinsing away the chemical byproducts of a long day of thinking and sensing. Astrocytes, a type of star-shaped glial cell, play a primary role in this clearance process. These cells have specialized water channels called aquaporin, located on their end feet, which wrap around the brain's blood vessels. These channels act like pressurized valves, regulating the movement of fluid into the dense space between neurons. It is a highly coordinated hydraulic system that operates entirely beneath the level of our conscious awareness. When the brain shifts into a state of rest, a fascinating physical transformation occurs within its architecture. The space between neurons, known as the interstitial space, expands by roughly 60%. This happens because the glial cells themselves physically shrink, losing volume to make room for the cleaning fluid to pass through. Without this expansion, the brain tissue is too densely packed for any meaningful fluid exchange to take place. As this fluid washes through the brain parenchyma, it picks up metabolic waste products like amyloid beta. This protein is a natural byproduct of neural activity, but if it is allowed to accumulate, it can form plaques that interfere with communication between cells. The glymphatic system ensures these proteins are swept toward the large veins of the head, where they eventually exit into the body's general circulation for disposal. The efficiency of this rinse cycle is remarkably high during certain phases of the daily cycle. Researchers at the University of Rochester found that the glymphatic system is nearly 10 times more active when the brain is not focused on external tasks. This suggests that the brain cannot effectively manage high-level processing and deep cellular cleaning at the same moment. It requires a dedicated period of low activity to reset its internal chemistry. Other metabolic leftovers, such as tau proteins and lactic acid, are also flushed out through these pathways. If the glymphatic flow is restricted, these substances can linger, leading to a feeling of mental heaviness or reduced cognitive clarity. The physical movement of the brain itself helps drive this process, as the pulsing of nearby arteries creates a gentle pumping action that pushes the fluid along its route. This internal irrigation system also helps distribute essential nutrients like glucose and lipids across the brain's vast landscape. By moving fluid through the tissue rather than relying on slow diffusion, the brain ensures that even the most remote neurons receive the fuel they need. It is a dual-purpose network that balances the delivery of resources with the removal of spent materials. The discovery of the glymphatic system is relatively recent, fundamentally changing our understanding of neurobiology. For decades, it was a mystery how such a high-energy organ managed to stay clean without traditional lymph nodes. We now know that the brain's solution is an elegant mechanical shift, changing its very shape to allow for a deep molecular scrub. Our internal world is governed by these silent, rhythmic patterns of maintenance and renewal. From the firing of a single neuron to the massive hydraulic shifts of the glymphatic system, the human body operates with a quiet, persistent intelligence. It is a self-sustaining engine of incredible complexity, constantly refining and repairing itself to meet the demands of existence. Don't forget to like and subscribe,